So I wanted to make a little bit of a tutorial on just sort of my daily work practice of drums and synthesizers for those that are interested. So I think those that have been following me have seen that, especially over the past 4 years, I've sort of moved away from a traditional jazz drumming approach, and I've been really trying to integrate a lot of different musical influences inside of me at this time. And the record that came out, my record Spiral, earlier this year, is a really great culmination of that period. And just a little bit of backstory: about 10 years ago, I was living in Salt Lake at the time. I didn't move back to New York yet, and I was teaching a lot of jazz, but I was not listening to a lot of jazz at that time, and I was listening to rival consoles in particular. Before that, I listened to a lot of Autechre. Of course, I was inspired by Aphex Twin, but that was sort of a path that I didn't really pursue. I was really inspired by Autechre a long time ago for just whatever they do, and it was around like 2014. I was listening to rival consoles, 2014, 2015, and I made a sort of a decision to find a way to have an organicism on the drums and find a way to make that work in the electronic world. And since that time, I've learned a lot about electronic music. I've learned a lot about electronic and experimental artists that have inspired me. And now I'm kind of working on finding my own way to bridge the two. So, this is a particularly good time for me to do it. I'm 42. I feel like I'm always going to be working on the drums. There's no summit you can ever really reach, but I do feel that I've sort of found whatever my voice is, and I have a lot of confidence in how I play the instrument. And so that's giving me some opening to become a beginner again and explore this world. And I really do want to acknowledge Austin White. We met a couple of years ago when we started a couple of projects, and I was really inspired by getting to work with him. He also had a jazz background, and he's really become a really great singular voice with electronic music. And I don't have his skill set. I don't have the skill set at all in this world. Like, I'm a total beginner, but it really kind of opened something up in me that really needed to be explored. And he also is on my record and produced it, so definitely check him out for sure. And earlier this year, I was having a beer with one of my favorite musicians, Abel Mogard, and he gave me the suggestion, you should listen to his music. He gave me the suggestion to really focus on one synth at a time, to really, you're going to find, as you're learning it, you're going to find your voice with it. So this is, I used to have a selection of synthesizers. Right now I've just narrowed it down to this one, and there's a few that I'll be kind of bringing in at a later stage, but I've been really focusing on the Moog Voyager. Obviously, those that know my journey know too that, Trent Reznor is a huge influence, and this instrument was a big part of. I actually purchased this not even thinking about that connection, but you can't really get away from, you know what I mean? So, but before I was a jazz drummer, obviously, Jimmy and the Pumpkins were probably the biggest influence that Jimmy is the reason that I play the drums, and I'm grateful to call him such a good friend. And prior to that, I also listened to Nine Inch Nails and Depeche Mode, and I grew up I grew up in a musical family. My father's a classical guitarist, and I studied a lot of music. I have a master's degree in performance and composition. At one point, I was going to pursue a classical PhD. Didn't really work out. But what it did, though, is it gave me a focus to put my emphasis on this, and that's what I've done. And now I feel like I'm a total beginner with this. Like, I mean, and it feels good. And I'm giving myself 8 years to develop some skills and a voice with this, and eventually find a way to make my own music, interfacing live and also producing it, where I feel like I really have something to say. So when I post these things, it's also just me sort of sharing my journey. But definitely check out my record that has Austin, Donnie McCaslin, Ben Lucas Boyson, an incredible composer as well, and Jimmy Chamberlain of the Smashing Pumpkins. So what I thought I would talk about is my thought process as I'm learning this. So the first thing is that the drums in the studio are like, this is, I really love the sound that I get here. So this stack, kind of unique stack I've created. One of the things that I've wanted to do is, in my technique, and there's a lot of classical and rudimental work that went into this, and also my independence, is that I want to have an evenness. Everything needs to have a real clarity, and I need to be able to decipher the tone in which, the timbre of the tone that I produce. So that why that's helpful is that when I'm playing with frequencies such as this, it's very similar to being a jazz improvisation, a jazz improviser, where it's not just encompassing the phrases, but also encompassing the way the phrases sort of are molded. That, the actual sonic structure. So like, there's a melody there, but if you listen to this, it's more of a binary melody, but there's certainly a melody, but there's also a taper to how, with the frequencies, there's a way in which there's a specificity to that sound. So what that's going to make me do is I'm going to find a way to connect to this melody in real time. This is all in real time, but I have to find a way to rhythmically, but also sonically perform with that. So obviously, I'm limited because if I use two hands, then I move away from here. So I have to have some left hand skill, So let's just see what I come up with. What I can do is I can shape and modify the sounds in a lot of ways. So right now I have the LFO set to this sort of rate, and what's cool about this particular tone is it's slightly out of tune, which creates a lot of propulsion and sort of tension that I'm trying to also encapsulate with. So if you listen to just that phrase, boo ba boo ba da ba doo, it was like a grouping of 5. Now I'm going to change the LFO to go a little faster rate. It's too fast. I mean, there's a lot of it's sort of the sky's the limit, and this is one synth with one selection. But I sort of want to give a jazz drummer's approach to how I'm integrating with it, and yeah, it's cool to be